Welcome to Grieving Out Loud. I'm your host, Angela Kennecke. Grief. It changes everything. It's a pain that steals your breath, a weight that never fully lifts. For Stephanie Wiley, that pain runs deeper than words can reach. She lost her teenage son, the boy who never missed a chance to tell her he loved her, to fentanyl poisoning. One moment he was there, the next, he was gone.
Went into his room and found him with his head on his desk and shook him and I just remember screaming so loud, but I couldn't, there was no noise coming out, not enough for anybody to hear me.
When going through a traumatic event, like the loss of a loved one, it can be especially helpful to find an activity that you enjoy and gives you purpose. For some, it's art. For others, it's journaling. For today's guest on Grieving Out Loud, that healing came from the warmth of an oven.
I needed something that was joyful and not serious and could bring a smile to people's faces.
Now, baking has become more than therapy for Stephanie. It's her business, her mission, and her way to honor her son's memory while raising awareness about the fentanyl epidemic. In this episode of Grieving Out Loud, Stephanie opens up about her journey from the desperate search for help as her teenage son battled addiction to the joy of watching him find recovery and the heartbreak of losing him soon after. Through it all, she's found a way to keep his spirit alive by sharing warmth, sweetness, and hope with others. Well, Stephanie, welcome to Grieving Out Loud. I am really excited to meet you. Thanks for pre-sending some cookies to us. It's pretty exciting to try those and really appreciate that. But also hate what brings us together. I speak to so many parents, about this collective shared grief that we have over the loss of our kids. So I'm very sorry for the loss of Tommy.
Thank you, and I feel the same about Emily, and I am so happy to be here.
Stephanie had two sons. The youngest, Tommy, was daring and adventurous, even at a young age.
He pushed every single limit, all growing. And I used to think in my head, I really never voiced it to anybody, but I always thought to myself, if I can just get him through high school safe, if I can just get him to the next place safe. And, I have another son who they were 2 years apart. My son, Peter, he's 2 years older than Tommy. He lives in Portland. And I never said that about Peter. Just that wasn't part of Peter's personality.
Do you know what I think, Stephanie? We have these children and they are all so different. And we don't have really time to change our parenting skills, right? When they're little and you have these kids and one is completely opposite from the other. And you have to relearn how to parent each kid. And that can be hard to do sometimes.
It really can. And, we all just do our best. I sort of have to remind myself constantly, I did my best. And my therapist, who I adore, has reminded me ever since, in the last 5 years since Tommy's been gone, Stephanie, you couldn't save him from himself. You couldn't. You did your best.
Right. And I always talk in this podcast how my daughter was a risk taker. She wanted to do everything, experience everything. And so it's no surprising that she tried drugs. And this started for her in high school. She was a little older. She would have been 28 now. So a little older than what Tommy would have been. But still, you can't monitor your kids 24/7. And even despite some of our best efforts, we can't always stop our kids from trying something, doing something.
Yeah. I mean, we just can't. And the thing is, when we were young, it wasn't as dangerous as it is.
No.
Tommy also started experimenting when he was pretty young. I mean, it all feels like a big puzzle now because I can't ask him questions. And I wish I had a timeline.
right.
you know?
Well, when we know the developing brain is really susceptible, we know that is, but they don't necessarily know or understand it. Kids, when they're doing this.
Right. I mean, they think they're invincible, just like all
Mm.
kids do. Um, I I know that Tommy started getting into some trouble in about high school. He had had several major concussions from the age of like 6th grade through about, I think his last one was like middle of 9th grade. And uh, I, he was in a lot of pain. He had a lot of neck pain from the last accident that he had been in. And I think he sought out, drugs as a painkiller, basically.
What kind of accidents was he in, or what caused the
Well, it
concussions?
was so interesting because you would think it was like sports related. He did play all sorts of sports, but the first concussion happened when he was in elementary school on the playground. He was playing tag and jumped from a playground structure and hit his head on monkey bars and then fell down to the ground and fell backwards. And so then hit his head on the back of the play structure. So that was the first one. Then he had a mountain biking accident. He also had a bad scooter accident in which he was sort of thrown over the hood of a car.
And was he kind of a daredevil too?
Oh,
I mean, it sounds like it, right? Like
absolutely.
he was
Yes.
just out there doing, yeah.
Whatever
And
he
we don't know,
wanted.
and we don't know everything about how concussions affect the brain as well, right?
Right.
And then you're talking about pain. He
Yeah.
had pain from all of these.
Yes. So the last major one happened at the beginning of his freshman year in high school, and his doctor actually would wanted us to pull him from school for the year. And we didn't do that. As a mom, if I could go back and change things, I would. And also I don't know if it
Well,
would have changed anything.
it's impossible to say. So even if you would have taken him out of school, all this still could have happened.
Yes,
Even if, I mean, we do have to preface anything anytime we think those kinds of things.
absolutely. And so he stayed in school, but he had a broken collarbone from that concussion, and he did hurt his neck. So I mean, I took him to chiropractors, I took him to doctors, all sorts of things. Looking back, I think he started taking pain meds from grandparents. Um,
Yeah.
and I mean, I don't know for sure, but that's sort of my feeling at this point. So at the end, what I can look back and sort of figure out is my son Peter was already off to college, so it was just Tommy and I at home. And I think the Christmas before he passed away is when he started experimenting with heavier drugs. There were some times where now I can look back and know that he had multiple overdoses under my roof, and I had no idea what they were. I didn't know what was happening.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, I'm not surprised. And when I say I didn't know my daughter was doing heroin, I was actually sort of grilled on national TV about that. How could you not know such a thing? And I'm like, well, I knew about the marijuana. I knew about the Xanax. I just never, my mind wouldn't go there that she would take that step to heroin,
Yes,
right? And I think
definitely.
as parents, we just want to believe the best of our kids. And if we're not knowledgeable in every symptom and every sign. So when you say multiple overdoses, like, tell me what happened.
Well, so one night I came home and I found him laying on the kitchen floor. But I mean, I just thought he was like drunk. I honestly
Oh,
had no idea. It was in the middle of the night. I had gotten home late. He had, I think, just gotten home. So that was one. Another time, I did call 911. And that one, I found him in the bathroom. They rushed him to the ER, and he was okay at the end of the day. But that was, oh gosh, the end of February 2020, and so I brought him home with me. His birthday was in March, so he was 17 years old. He had had an overdose. They kept him in the hospital, until morning.
Did they know what drugs were they
They
test him
didn't
for
test for
drugs?
fentanyl then. So they just said it was, I believe they said it was opiates and maybe alcohol. But honestly, I can look back and like sort of feel disappointed in the hospital and also the police throughout the entire thing until he died.
Right. Well, so you just if I may interrupt you just
Yeah.
for a second with the importance of testing overdose survivor for fentanyl. I know California now has a law where they do that, and you were in California at the time, right?
Yes.
But this was 2020, and in fact, we're looking at this in our state right now. Several states have now um, taken on these laws to require hospitals to test for fentanyl for an overdose survivor. Because how do we know? We won't know. There's no way to get a handle on this if we don't know.
Right. Right. And even when he died and they did the toxicology at the coroner's office, we didn't get the report back for 6 months. And even when we did get the report back, it did list fentanyl and heroin, but they had confused his body with another body. It was just really very
Oh,
disappointing. And,
oh,
it's just one of those heartbreaking moments where you think, like, this is my child and nobody cares, really, is what it felt like.
right. I understand that feeling, and I've heard that sentiment from so many parents. Are you ready to protect the next generation from the dangers of substance use? Emily's Hope has created a comprehensive K through 12 substance use prevention curriculum designed to educate, empower, and equip students with the tools they need to make healthy choices. Our age-appropriate lessons start in kindergarten and build through high school, using science, real stories, and interactive learning to help kids understand their bodies, brains, and risk of drug use. We're already reaching thousands of students across multiple states, and we're just getting started. Visit emilyshopeedu.org to learn more and share our curriculum with your school administrators and counselors. At Emily's Hope, we believe prevention begins with education. Let's work together to keep our kids safe. Even though Stephanie didn't feel supported by the hospital or law enforcement, she knew she had to fight for her son. When Tommy overdosed and survived, he was just 17.
We did have a friend whose father worked in a local men's rehabilitation center. And so we reached out to him, and through him, we were really fortunate to get a counselor of his to help start working with us. But Tommy was almost 18, so his birthday was in March. So we were not able to get him into an adult rehab because he was only 17. And because his birthday was so soon, we were not able to get him into a juvenile rehab because they knew that once he came in, he was going to turn 18. So we didn't have very many options. So I kept him home with me for 3 weeks until his 18th birthday. He was basically detoxing at home. I didn't even know what that meant, really. I can look back now and it just breaks my heart that he had to do that at home. And also, this was right before everything shut down for COVID. And so he was soon after pretty isolated, although we really wanted to isolate him anyway. Then, through this counselor who started to see Tommy, he let us know about the fentanyl situation. And so he had told Tommy repeatedly, Tommy, if you use again, you're probably going to get fentanyl. You probably already have fentanyl in your system.
What was Tommy's attitude toward all this? I mean, what was he saying, or was he receptive to help, or was he denying things
He
with you, or
was
how?
very receptive to help and wanted help. And he willingly went to rehab. I took him on his 18th birthday and left him there. He wanted to go. He had so much shame. He was angry. He was angry, I think, at everybody. And it just, I think he just felt so ashamed that he'd gone down this path. And I think that I really think starting the really hard drugs started in December, and it just was like this really quick pathway downhill.
Right. And I think with my daughter, it couldn't have been much more than 6 months to 9 months before her death, maybe a year. I try to piece things together too. Like, when did the heroin start? Since I didn't know until after her death. When did that start? I kind of knew about pills, and it's just such a hard thing. And my daughter was extremely ashamed as well, which I later found out in her journal. So, these kids carry this around, and it's so hard as a parent to navigate it and to get help and to get the right help. And so he finally goes in for treatment at age 18.
Mhm.
And how long did that go for? And how did
So,
that go?
well, I mean, it went okay, but also that was right during everything being shut down. So I think I was able to talk on the phone to him a couple times. I was able to visit him only one time. They weren't allowed to go to any in-person meetings. I mean, they couldn't leave this house. And, I also sort of question how much time he spent with all these men. I mean, he was young. And
Yes.
so I
Yes.
can't really remember. I mean, now also it's all a little bit fuzzy. I think he was in rehab for about 6 to 7 weeks, which, obviously I know now is not long enough, but that was what insurance would pay for.
Sure.
So he got out. He was able to get catch up on all schoolwork and everything. I mean, because the schools went remote, that was a little bit of a break for him to be able to finish schoolwork, and he was able to graduate from high school. He had, gotten college acceptances and everything, but I think he was so scared about what was going to come next because he was so fragile. He really just felt so fragile. So he got out of rehab. We had a couple of weeks. I feel like it was maybe like 4 weeks where he was out of rehab, doing pretty well. Also, though, isolated at home again because of COVID. And so he would do these meetings online, sitting in the backyard, which was really difficult to watch and experience being home with him. Um, he graduated from high school. His high school did a drive-through graduation, which was just so
I
sad.
Yeah, I had kids graduating at a child graduating at the same time. And yeah, I remember the virtual graduation, sitting in front of the TV, and the drive thing in the parking lot. And then finally we did have a graduation ceremony in a stadium in late June, I think it was.
Okay.
But yes, all of that,
Yeah,
right? These kids, really, the class of 2020, oh, did they get cheated
they
out of?
really did so much.
Mhm.
So we also, now I would not do this again, but we had given his car back to him on his graduation. We were so proud of him for graduating because when all of this happened, we didn't know what would be the next step. So we gave his car back to him. He had his car for a week. Um, so 1 week after graduation, I had gone to a photo shoot. It was a Friday afternoon, and I was doing a senior girl in his class, photographing her senior pictures, and left Tommy at home. That morning, my son Peter had left, said goodbye to Tommy, left to drive to Oregon. He wanted to go back just for a week to see his friends since he had to come home. So he left that morning. I left Tommy later that morning. We said, I love you. Tommy wore his heart on his sleeve, always told me he loved me so much, hugged me, wanted his back rubbed. I was like to the point where I was always irritated. And now I would rub his back every day of his life if I could. Um, anyway, so I went to this photo shoot and I was on my way home and called him and he didn't answer the phone. And I got home and it was a warm day. And usually we had left the house unlocked and left windows open. And I got home and the house was locked and all the windows were closed. And I knocked and there was no answer. I don't remember if there was music or not. I feel like possibly there was music playing. I opened the door, went in the house, yelled for Tommy. No answer, no answer. Went into his room and found him with his head on his desk and shook him. And um, I just remember screaming so loud, but like I couldn't, there was no noise coming out, not enough for anybody to hear me. Um, I called 911 and they got there and, came with engines, lights blaring. And by that time, they walked me outside when they came in the house and they, tried to revive him. And by this time, every single neighbor's out on the street, wondering what's happening. And I called my ex-husband at that time to meet me at the hospital. I got in the police car. We drove to the hospital. Turns out they had taken Tommy to a different hospital. So my ex-husband met me at the first hospital. We drove to the hospital where he was at. We went into the ER and the doctor pulled us into a separate room. And that's when we knew, like, there's nothing good ever coming when they pull you into second room. So then we, had to call our families and let everybody know what's happening. Meanwhile, my other son, had just gotten to Oregon and we had to figure out how to get him back. And it was, it was my worst nightmare. And
Of course.
I feel like when I think about it, it feels like just yesterday I can remember all those details.
Right. And don't you, I mean, I think for the first couple of years, especially, I thought about that day when if there's a certain kind of trauma that goes being there when your child is died, is dead, you find them, being on the scene. I was on the scene, arriving shortly after ambulance did to her apartment and being there with her. Uh, all of that is just, it's etched in your brain forever, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And
Yeah.
I also have to say, I'm so glad that I was able to be there because I've talked to parents who weren't.
Right. Right. I have two. I have
Yeah,
two. There is no good scenario.
no,
Okay. There's
absolutely.
no preferred option. I feel like I don't know. It's just all really difficult and really traumatizing.
Mhm.
And also, I know you said it took a long time to find out what actually killed him. Do you know if he was using heroin at the time or if it was a pill? Not that it
Yeah,
matters. I'm just curious.
the police had, well, I didn't even know what it was. So on his desk was black tar heroin that
Mm.
had fentanyl in it.
So he was poisoned by fentanyl, just like my daughter probably had no idea that it had fentanyl in it.
Exactly. And this was, I believe, I mean, he'd been doing really well and he just decided to use one more time. And that was one more time was enough.
Was anyone charged in his death?
No. And we had just gotten him a new cell phone. And so I felt like at that moment, that was all I had left of his. And so I didn't turn it over to the police. Um, I I mean, I went through the phone as much as I could, and it was literally a brand new phone. So there was nothing on it. And I feel like at this point, you know, I I called the police afterwards and said, "Is there any way you can still use his phone for this?" And they really just considered his death an overdose, and
Oh,
that was it,
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. And of course, you are not alone. And the parents I have talked to over and over again on this podcast whose case was basically like, well, it's just an overdose. Too bad. We're not going to do anything. We're not going to investigate. And I am sorry that happened to you and to your family. It's tough because every single one of these deaths should be investigated and the people who provided the drugs should be held accountable. or it's never going to stop. I mean, if people are allowed just to get away with providing, dealing these drugs and providing these things, what we know now are laced with fentanyl and or nitazines and other things today, um, it has to be stopped and people have to be held accountable. I mean, there's so many things that went wrong in your case. And with COVID, I also think about how the number of overdose and fentanyl poisoning deaths skyrocketed during COVID in the immediate years following. We're starting to see, a decline now, but COVID claimed so much more than people from the virus, right?
Oh,
I mean, the pandemic claimed so many young lives from isolation, mental health issues, substance use disorder issues, and your son being among them.
yeah. Yeah. It's one of those, like, when people that hadn't lost a child during that time, um, complain about the shutdown, I don't mean to be callous, but I just feel like, God, I would take a shutdown any day over losing a child.
Right.
Yeah.
And then also like your ability to grieve and to I wrote a blog about this during the pandemic. Like when Emily died in 2018, hundreds of people showed up at the wake, hundreds of people showed up at the funeral, right? And people came to my house and they brought, and this happened to you during the pandemic. And I bet you felt really isolated in your grief.
Well, I did and I didn't. So it's very interesting. I think I grew up in the same community where my kids went to high school. And as soon as he died, our house was full of people for the next 4 to 7 days. I was so fortunate to have such a big support community around me and people that were willing to come over and be in my house and be in my yard so that found it felt very, very comforting to me. We had a funeral for Tommy I guess it was towards the end of June. We had it in a church. We had to do it by invitation. We were allowed to have 90 people come, and they did stream it. And so I watched the stream later and know that, 1,500 people watched it and left comments while it was going on. And that was comforting. Um, we also had a gathering in somebody's yard afterwards and invited people that we couldn't invite to the service. But I, like you, writing a blog soon after Tommy died, I started writing. It was really my comfort zone. And part of the reason I did that also was I moved out of that area 2 months after Tommy died, just under 2 months afterwards. And so I really left everybody pretty much that I was close with, except for my then fiance. And so writing was a really good way for me to be able to continue getting support from people um, that I was no longer near physically.
Right. And I wrote my blog so to get my emotions out, to get what my thoughts on paper, and because I'm a writer, but also so other people would know they were not so alone in their feelings and what they were going through. Because I think there is so much universal about grief, especially the grief of the loss of a child. Um, Universal feelings, universal experiences, right?
Yeah, I agree with you. I wrote it for multiple reasons, I think. I started writing it because people didn't know what to say to me. And then I would get these some people that were really very caring, and I know they cared so much, but when they would approach me like I was broken, I didn't like that. I didn't respond well to that. And so I found that if I was vulnerable in putting my emotions and experiences out there, then it sort of allowed them to talk to me about it because I was willing. They knew I was willing to talk about it.
As one of the nation's strongest financial organizations, First Premier Bank and Premier Bank Card have the strength to do good. We support nearly 700 organizations and nonprofits. Our employees give more than 30,000 volunteer hours annually. And we are continually seeking ways to make South Dakota an even better place to live. It's the Premier way. First Premier Bank and Premier Bank Card.
Along with writing, Stephanie found comfort in another creative outlet, baking. She'd spent years behind the camera as a photographer, but after losing her son, she knew something in her life had to change. That change eventually led her to start a new career and a new business built around baking. Now, through Tommy's Cookie Company, Stephanie is honoring her son's memory in a sweet way. This month, the company is donating $1 from every bag sold to Emily's Hope. They've also released a special limited edition flavor for November, peppermint. You can find more details about Tommy's Cookie Company in the show notes of this episode.
After I moved, I started baking because I was still pretty isolated. I wasn't working. I wasn't doing a lot. I was really just sort of sitting in my emotions. Also, though, that following year, the next 2 years, I traveled a lot back and forth because both of my parents were sick. And so in May of 21, I lost my mom. And then in June of 22, I lost my dad. So throughout all of this, writing and baking really were sort of what kept my sanity, really.
And you've got compound grief you're talking about. And then when you lose a parent after losing a child, it brings back all the grief back up again from the first loss and the second loss and so on and so on. I've learned a lot about grief in my studies to become, a grief educator. And I just think that it's just so brutal and hard to explain to somebody who hasn't experienced that.
Yeah, it's just honestly too much. My mom, since my parents had both been sick for a couple of years, I felt like I was going through anticipatory grief already. And then when I lost Tommy, that sort of took over everything. And so even when I lost my parents, of course, I missed them so much. I also felt all sorts of guilt for really only being able to focus on my grief for Tommy.
Oh, you felt like you couldn't grieve your parents properly.
Mm-mm. I still don't. I
Oh,
really still don't.
yeah. I understand that because a child is it's different. It's just different than a parent, right? I'm not saying better, worse, anything, but yes, like that grief is so all-consuming when you lose a kid because as mothers, we're supposed to be able to protect our children. We're supposed to be able to save them, right?
Right.
And and it's just a different relationship with the parent. And when you lose a parent or an aunt or uncle or sibling, it's different.
It is. It's just different. And there's no right and wrong. And I have talked to some of my mom's friends about this because I feel like so guilty for that because I feel like, did I love my mom enough? I'm only grieving Tommy, and of
Oh,
course I know I did. But the grief for Tommy sort of just takes over a little bit. And so that's been tricky to deal with. But I always remind myself that, I'm just doing the best that I can do. And that brings me back to one other reason that I did start writing was that after Tommy died, like now there's so many ways people can reach us, right? They can reach us direct message on all the different social media. They can text us, they can call us, they can write to us, they can email us. So I took screenshots of every text, every Facebook message, everything, because it was just really comforting to me to read those messages. And I also felt like while I did have a couple of people in my life say things that, maybe I wouldn't suggest saying.
everybody has that happen right
Yeah,
after they've experienced a
yeah.
loss. Sure.
But I truly believe that people are, again, trying their best. And after some time, I could go back and say, like, I have to give those people grace also
Yes.
because they're just trying their best.
I thought the same thing when people said something to me that I felt kind of like, oh, but I just thought they don't know. And I'm glad they don't know this kind of pain and they don't know what they're saying could be considered offensive or just make you feel worse, right? Even if you're not
Right.
offended.
Right.
But they're trying. They're trying and I'm glad they don't have to know this kind of pain or to understand
Yes,
this kind of loss.
I agree.
Right. You
Yeah.
have to give people, you have to give yourself
Mhm.
grace and give others grace. And there's so little of that in today's world.
Yeah.
We give each other so little grace, and so little understanding of trying to understand other people's perspectives. And sadly,
Yeah.
I think,
I agree with you.
right.
I agree.
Have you lost a loved one to overdose or fentanyl poisoning? I'd like to invite you to share their story on our new Emily's Hope Memorial website called More Than Just a Number. They were our children, siblings, cousins, husbands, wives, aunts, uncles, and friends. So much more than just a number. You can submit a memorial today on morethanjustanumber.org. You did a lot after experiencing profound losses, duplicate losses. You moved to a strange city, you kind of lose your support network. Um, I know you're in a beautiful place in Montana, but that may not make up for some loneliness that you had to feel.
Right. I think that, after you lose a child, meeting new people is really very tricky because
Well, what's the first words out of your mouth? My son died, right? I
exactly.
mean,
Like,
yeah. And how do you make friends under those circumstances,
yeah.
right?
And who wants to be your friend? I mean, and I,
Well,
also
and I
as
lost friends. I lost friends after Emily died. I'm sure I acted erratically and wasn't in myself. I mean, who is? But people that didn't want to be around me and people that, still think I talk too much about this stuff because they'd rather not think about it,
sure.
right?
And also, those aren't the people that you would want to have in your life anyway, you
Right.
know.
That's true.
Yeah.
Very true. But to make new friends
To make new
when you're
friends.
feeling that.
Yeah, I do feel like, I mean, I have made friends and I have also kept friends from before. And so I have a lot of long distance good friends. But um, I would say this year, so year 5, is really the first time I have felt like, okay, I'm sort of ready to have friends again, you know,
Mm.
and put myself out there enough. And also, I feel like I'm just a little bit more myself than I have been in the last couple of years.
Right. And we'll never be who we were before this happened.
No.
None of us who've lost a child in this way will be. Then I think I've said this before that it's not what I would have chosen for my story, right? It was forced upon us and it changes us in profound ways, but not always for the bad, often for the
I
good.
agree. I definitely agree with you. And I think that, when you have such tremendous loss, for me, it's been really important to find some sort of reason to keep going forward and meaning. Um, so I started baking. I had baked this one particular cookie and for many years. And after moving here, I had sent it to one of my brothers, and he had not had it before. He lived out of state, and called me immediately, and he's like, "Why aren't you doing something with this?" And I knew when I moved to Montana that I was no longer going to do photography. I just didn't have it in me anymore, and taking photos of families sounded just too painful. So I hadn't been working, and I just decided to go for it. And within a week, I built a website. I started taking orders. I put it in production, and that's sort of how it started. Just like really, just by the seat of my pants.
Were you energized by those
I
things?
was, yeah,
Wow. Well, then you found it. You found it, right? I mean, we have to find something after loss to give us purpose, a
absolutely.
purpose in our pain. And I love it. Your creativity, with baking led you to that.
Yeah. I needed something that was joyful and not serious and could bring a smile to people's faces. And so I started doing that in the fall of 21, but that was just very, very part time didn't go full time until the winter of 23. And then this year in 25, we rebranded. So we started out as Fat Kid Cookie Company. And, I just needed something silly. This year we rebranded as Tommy's Cookie Co. And I really don't think I would not have been able to do that until this year. The first time I went out and did something in public under the new name, I really didn't realize how emotionally draining that was going to be. And so now I've gotten used to it, and the reception has been great. And for me, it's so special to be able to have his picture on our bags and to be able to tell his story. And it just opens up this dialogue with people that I love. I just love the connection and hearing other people's stories. And, I just want to build something that he was never able to do himself because he was just so young. And I want to grow it to a place where we can give back in a meaningful way. But until we can do that financially, I just want to talk about it. And I think it's so important to talk about addiction and the shame that goes along with it. And it's not fair for these kids. They didn't ask to
Right.
be addicts.
No, no. And we have a long ways to go. One of our main advocacy work is to reduce stigma. And until we reduce all of the stigma, we're not going to get all of the prevention and all of the treatment. And as long as there's stigma, there are going to be barriers and for our kids and for future generations. And so I love what you're doing. I love that you're giving back through your cookie company
Thank you.
and that you're doing it in your son's name and in his honor. I think it's a beautiful thing to do.
Thank you. Thank you.
And did Tommy like your cookies?
Well, it's so funny because he actually loved soft cookies, and these are crispy cookies. He
Mm.
loved to bake cookies. He would make chocolate chip cookies probably weekly. That was something we really shared. He lived on sugar and protein. And so I do think it's very funny that these were not his favorite cookies, but they have turned into something that bears his name, um, and baking them just, makes me happy.
And are you getting the cookies out into stores and things like that?
Yeah, we are. We are in stores throughout Montana and slowly growing to other states. We have an online store, so a lot of our orders are shipped out of state. Um, but it's been fun to see the growth. It's scary. It's really scary and a little overwhelming sometimes, but it's also exciting.
I get that, just growing the charity the way that we've been growing. It's a little overwhelming and scary at times, but also very important, right? And the work you're doing is important. And I appreciate that because you're also giving back.
Yeah, that's, m- he's the reason I'm doing this. And I want to be able to give back. And it's just really important to me. And I think that, like what you're doing, and, you know, there are people that are going to go on and create amazing nonprofits. And then the other people that are going to support those profits, and
Yeah.
I can be in the group that's going to go on to support those.
But also, you've created something in your son's name as well. So you're really doing both in a way and educating people through that
Yes.
medium. It may be a different channel to do it, but it's still doing it, which is incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been a
Yeah.
huge learning experience. I feel like I've gone back to school 3 times over, but it's been good. It's good for me to keep my mind busy and, learn, keep my brain going.
It gives you purpose.
Yeah.
It gives you purpose, and it carries on Tommy's name
Yes.
in a really cool way. So thank you for everything that you're doing, and thank you for sharing his story, and really appreciate it.
Thank you. I just love listening to your podcast. I do cry during most of the episodes.
I'm sorry.
But it's a
I
good,
know a lot of these are heavy, right?
they are. And you just feel such connection to the stories. And it's a good cry, it's good to feel that connection to other people, especially when you've experienced similar things.
Right. You are not alone. You are not alone. I'm not alone. You're not alone. Anybody who's listening to this podcast, all of our listeners here with us right now are not alone. We have been to the depths. We've been through it, and we are marching forward with purpose.
Absolutely. That's all we can do. Just do our best.
Well, thank you. Thank you again for coming on the program.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been so nice to meet you, and I just am so appreciative of all that you're doing.
And thank you again for listening to Grieving Out Loud. You can find more episodes, read my blog, and check out the latest news headlines about the opioid epidemic and substance use disorder on our website, emilyshope.charity. You can find a link in the show notes. Again, we've also put more information about Tommy's Cookie Company in the show notes too. Thanks again for listening. Until next time, wishing you faith, hope, and courage. This podcast is produced by Casey Wannenberg King and Kaylee Fitz.